Prime Minister Narendra Modi is participating in the G7 outreach session in Italy on the invitation of his Italian counterpart, Giorgia Meloni. Now, this is the Prime Minister's first visit to a foreign country after recently assuming office as the Prime Minister for the third consecutive term. Most importantly, according to experts, the Prime Minister is also getting a chance to reconnect and reboot relations with the leaders of the West at the G7 summit, which is also marking its 50th anniversary. This summit is going to be dominated by the Russia-Ukraine war and Israel-Hamas war talks. In addition to India, the leaders of Algeria, Argentina, Brazil, Egypt, Kenya and Saudi Arabia, along with South Africa, Tunisia and Turkey, have all been invited to this massive outreach session. So what's going to be on the Prime Minister's agenda? Well, Prime Minister Modi will engage in an action-packed day in Italy during the G7 outreach session. He's going to be participating in a summit session titled Artificial Intelligence, Energy, Africa, Mediterranean, which is also going to be hosted by the Italian Prime Minister Meloni. This session is also going to be joined by Pope Francis. The Prime Minister is expected to use the G7 summit as an opportunity to create synergy between the outcomes of the G20 summit that was held under India's presidency and also deliberate on issues that are crucial for the global South. Well, Prime Minister Modi is holding bilateral interactions with US President Joe Biden, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, French President Emmanuel Macron, Japanese Prime Minister Kishida, and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Managing India's conflict with China and its cooperation with Russia while expanding ties with the West is going to be testing India's diplomacy amidst the escalation of the conflict in Ukraine and mounting military tensions with Beijing. Now let's tell you about the key focus areas during the summit. Prime Minister Modi will be addressing several critical topics. First, Africa, climate change and development. This summit will open with discussions on vital issues reflecting their importance for both the global South and India's development agenda. Then the next topic is Middle East and the Ukrainian conflict. The ongoing conflict in these regions is definitely expected to dominate discussions with leaders seeking ways to resolve these very complex geopolitical challenges. Then is artificial intelligence, AI, which is going to be a key topic in the summit, highlights India's growing focus on its applications and its potential. Global challenges, the Prime Minister will be engaging with all the top leaders on pressing international issues, demonstrating India's commitment to global cooperation and problem solving. The G7 summit also offers Prime Minister Modi a chance to engage with other world leaders on issues that are very critical and important to India and the global South. It also provides opportunities for bilateral meetings with G7 leaders on the sidelines. Prime Minister Modi's attendance at G7 underscores India's active engagement on the global stage. And by addressing key issues and holding these very important strategic discussions, Prime Minister Modi aims to strengthen India's position and contribute to resolving pressing global issues and challenges. The G7 meet is going to be witnessing a high-level attendance. US President Joe Biden, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and the French President, along with many others, are attending this meeting. Several leaders, including Turkish President Recep Erdogan, Ukrainian President Zelensky and the Catholic spiritual leader Pope Francis are all present in Italy. Erdogan, in fact, is expected to attend sessions on Africa, the Mediterranean, artificial intelligence and energy as well. Pope Francis, interestingly, is expected to address the session on artificial intelligence. He is expected to urge world leaders to adopt AI regulations, a subject that the Pope has spoken about several times in the past, including after he was himself a subject of viral AI-generated images that many believed were actually real. Meanwhile, in the latest, leaders of the group of 7 major democracies have agreed on an outline deal to provide $50 billion of loans to Ukraine. The G7 has agreed to use frozen Russian assets to raise $50 billion for Ukraine to help it fight invading Russian forces. Now, this political agreement is the centerpiece of the opening day in southern Italy of the annual summit of G7 leaders that has been attended for a second successive year by Ukrainian President Zelensky. US President Joe Biden said it was yet another reminder to Russia that, quote-unquote, "we are not backing down." But Russia has threatened of what it says extremely painful retaliatory measures. Many of the G7 top leaders are themselves struggling as they confront an array of problems in their nations, including China's economic ambitions, the growth of artificial intelligence, and the ongoing turmoil in the Middle East. The leaders expressed their concerns about the situation on the Israel-Lebanon border and have even endorsed United States efforts to secure a ceasefire in the Gaza war. In addition, they have even called on Israel to refrain from a full-scale offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, in line with their obligations under the international law. Western nations are expected to voice both unanimous concerns over China's industrial overcapacity, which they say is distorting global markets, and their determination to help African states develop their economies. Confronting China will also be high on the agenda. G7 leaders are expected to express concern over high Chinese production levels, which they say disrupt global supply chains and market stability. The leaders are expected to discuss measures to level the playing field and consider potential sanctions to counter heavily subsidized Chinese companies. Among the other thorny questions on the agenda will be that of migration, an issue at the top of Western issues which has helped fuel a recent resurgence of populism and far-right parties in Europe and the US. Managing migration and supporting displaced populations will be key on the agenda. Discussions will cover policy coordination on migration, providing humanitarian aid, and enhancing border security to manage migration flows effectively.